Welcome to today's Explainer. Get ready because we are diving straight into a totally chilling and honestly incredibly urgent mystery at the absolute bottom of our planet. Today, we're going to decode exactly why the world's most extreme, hostile, and isolated continent, Antarctica, is literally tearing itself apart right before our eyes. And more importantly, we'll see why scientists are calling this a ticking time bomb for the entire globe. 2 kilometers. Let that number just sink in for a second. That is the terrifying width of a colossal crack known as Chasm 1. We aren't just talking about a tiny fissure in the ice here. This gap grew so unbelievably wide that it essentially ripped a massive chunk right off the continent. It's almost like an entire limb got severed from Antarctica's body. And the most alarming part? This is really just the beginning of a sudden, totally baffling surge in cracks waking up all across the ice. Now, these cracks aren't just impossibly wide. They're moving fast, like incredibly fast. In regions like the Pine Island Glacier, fissures have been developing at speeds of up to 130 kilometers per hour. Think about that. That's the speed of a car driving down a highway. In another case, the Larsen B ice shelf completely shattered and broke apart in just 35 days. The ice is fracturing at this breakneck pace, literally in the blink of an eye. So why is this a massive emergency for the rest of us? Well, just consider the sheer scale of what we're dealing with. A staggering 90% of the entire planet's ice is locked up right there in Antarctica. Even more critically, that ice holds 70% of the world's freshwater. So if these immense glaciers continue to crack, break off, and melt into the ocean, we're talking about a catastrophic, permanent alteration of our global sea levels. To figure out why the ice is behaving like this, we really have to look at the incredibly violent environment shaping it. Picture a destructive, normal hurricane, which usually packs winds of around 100 to 150 kilometers per hour. Now, compare that to an Antarctic blizzard, where winds scream across the ice at 300 kilometers per hour. This happens because Antarctica is actually the only place on Earth where the ground is colder than the sky above it. Gravity violently pushes that dense, freezing air down, creating what are known as katabatic winds. They just accelerate into these vicious, relentless blizzards. And speaking of that freezing air, check out this temperature, minus 90 degrees Celsius. Just to put that immense hostility into perspective, a dry, cold winter in a city like Delhi hits around 5 degrees Celsius, and, that's enough to give you cracked libs and make you want to stay indoors. Antarctica's minus 90 degrees is an entirely different universe of cold. It makes it a nearly impossible environment for any permanent land animal to survive. Literally, not even polar bears live here. But here is probably the craziest part. Despite all that frozen water, the humidity in Antarctica is actually less than 1%. It is technically drier than the burning sands of the Sahara Desert. Because this freezing, moisture-starved air retains almost zero water, it will violently suck the moisture right out of a human body. If you step outside unprotected, you're facing instant dehydration and devastating frostbite within seconds, as your exposed skin turns black and dies. That lethal combination of wind and cold creates a truly terrifying phenomenon known as a whiteout. In a whiteout, the sky, the fog, and the ground all just blend into one blinding sheet of white. Travelers completely lose all sense of direction, just wandering in endless circles. And that is incredibly dangerous because the ground beneath them is absolutely riddled with invisible crevasses. These steep, hidden cracks in the ice that plunge up to 100 feet deep. One wrong step, you drop straight into a frozen grave. Because of all this extreme hostility, the continent stayed totally hidden from humanity for most of history. Philosophers had imagined a southern land for thousands of years, sure, but it wasn't until 1773 that James Cook even managed to cross the Antarctic Circle. In 1820, Fabian von Bellingshausen finally spotted it hiding way up on a 2,500-meter plateau. And it was only in 1911 that Roald Amundsen narrowly beat Robert Scott in a grueling, brutal race to be the first to reach the South Pole. But that race came with an immense, tragic human cost. The BBC actually dubbed this continent a frozen graveyard, and for good reason. After losing the race to the South Pole, Robert Scott and his entire Terra Nova expedition team were caught in a brutal blizzard on their way back. Starving, freezing, and exhausted, they all perished. Their bodies were forever swallowed by the deep, unyielding ice. Fast forward to today, and the danger definitely hasn't vanished. We've just had to engineer our way around it. Back in 2016, a massive crack threatened the British Antarctic Survey's Halley VI research base. So, in this unbelievable feat of modern engineering, scientists essentially treated their high-tech base like Lego blocks. Over 13 weeks, using specialized tractors, they dragged the entire modular station 23 kilometers inland just to escape the widening chasm. And thank goodness they did, because by 2023, those cracks birthed immense icebergs like the 81.
Which brings us to how humans actually managed to survive there right now. Take the U.S. McMurdo Station, for example. During the summer, up to 1,000 residents live there. They're supported by ATMs, hospitals, and incredibly strict waste recycling rules where literally everything has to be shipped back to the U.S. But the isolation, it's so profound. They rely on these brief 4 to 5 hour daily windows with passing satellites just for internet. Data is so limited that sending a single email can cost you about $3. So you're probably wondering, why even endure this extreme isolation and expense? Well, it's because that brutal, zero-humidity air makes Antarctica the absolute best place on Earth to peer into the deep universe. Without water molecules in the air to distort space signals, scientists get a crystal-clear view of the cosmos. In fact, capturing the very first image of a black hole back in 2019, that wouldn't have been possible without the South Pole Telescope, stationed right there in the freezing dark, studying the mysteries of dark matter. But while scientists are busy looking up at the stars, they're also monitoring a critical threshold right beneath their feet. And that brings us to the Thwaites Glacier, or as scientists grimly call it, the Doomsday Glacier. 65 centimeters. Now, that might sound like a pretty small number, right? Actually, scratch that. It represents a catastrophic global sea level rise if just the Doomsday Glacier melts. To put it in perspective, an elevation of just 6 inches has already caused heavy flooding in places like North Carolina. If Thwaites goes, we are looking at devastating global flooding that would literally drown heavily populated coastal regions across Japan, Bangladesh, China, and parts of India like Kerala and West Bengal. Yet there is this totally fascinating flip side to all this. As these immense ice shelves crack and separate, they are pulling back the curtain on a completely alien world. When sunlight hits the Antarctic seafloor for the first time in millennia, remotely operated vehicles have discovered these bizarre ecosystems thriving in the pitch black. We're talking giant sponges, vibrant pink corals, and phantom jellyfish with bells spanning 5 feet long. It just goes to show that life really does find a way, even in the most unforgiving darkness. But not all discoveries under the ice are beautiful. Some carry massive biological implications. As the thick permafrost melts, scientists are monitoring what they call zombie viruses. Yeah, it sounds like sci-fi, but they're real. These are ancient, unknown pathogens frozen for thousands of years that could reactivate. Just recently, scientists uncovered 48,500-year-old Pandora virus in the permafrost. If the ice keeps melting, it could release these ancient viruses into our global ecosystem, creating a biological dynamic we have literally never faced before.
And then there is a huge geopolitical vulnerability. 500 billion. That is the estimated number of barrels of oil hiding beneath Antarctica's 5-kilometer thick ice. That's the second largest oil reserve in the entire world, sitting right behind the Middle East. You can easily imagine the international scramble and potential conflict if the world's most powerful nations decided to try and claim or drill into those resources.
Fortunately for now, we are protected by Earth's final shield, the Antarctic Treaty. This incredible international agreement strictly forbids any military presence and completely bans all mining or drilling. It also enforces this really strict don't pack a pest policy to protect the hyper-fragile ecosystem. Tourists and scientists have to undergo extreme sterilization. You aren't even allowed to kneel on the snow or dump any biological waste. This ensures no foreign bacteria or avian flu strains can further decimate the local penguin and seal populations.
Which basically brings us to the end of today's Explainer, leaving us with a really provocative question to ponder. In a place with no permanent population, a place that violently rejects human interference with 300-kilometer-per-hour winds and 100-foot-deep icy graves, are we simply nature's temporary guests, or will our global impact make us its next victims? It is a stark reminder that some frontiers are meant to test our limits, not be conquered. Thanks so much for learning with us today.